It's important to monitor a student's progress with assistive technology because you're collecting data and you have to have a reason to have that data. And it's about whether or not things need to be adjusted, whether or not that you're continuing along the right path with this assistive technology. It's not something that you just look at the end of an IEP year cycle. It is making sure that a child is continuing to make adequately yearly progress at whatever that's set up and as a measure within the school. You know, keeping track of their grades, and as a result of using technology, has there been improvement in their participation? Whether we're looking at their academic participation, has this assistive technology impacted their ability to be in an inclusionary environment? Has it impacted their social participation at school? Has it impacted their measures of independence? So it's hard to break apart data collection during implementation from monitoring progress. They are very tied together. It's making sure that the progress that you're looking for actually was measured practically with the data that you were collecting.
A student's progress in using AT should be monitored at least as frequently as you're monitoring the progress of other students. That may be quarterly, that may be every 6 weeks. You may also have an even shorter timeline for some specific things. The IEP team should discuss that as they set up their data collection and think about when they're going to use it. For some things, we may want to try 2 or 3 different alternatives and only try them for a week or 2, depending on the situation. For perhaps trying to identify a switch that works. We might not have to use it for 6 weeks. We might want to use it for 1 week and then try another and another and help the student choose which one they like. So there's no answer really to when that is a set number. The when is it depends, and it depends on what you need to know, how fast you think you can find that out. But certainly the critical piece in checking progress is you have to look at what's happening and analyze it to see if it's making a difference. A series of check marks on a piece of paper simply don't tell you that. You need to enter it in some kind of a graph or a chart or a computer program. You know, there's just so much technology out there now that you can use as a resource that you can turn things into useful information quickly and easily. And we need to do that. We need to look at the growth line. We need to see, are we making progress? How is he doing compared to what he did last year? How is he doing compared to other students with similar needs? We have to have some different things we look at to decide if this is effective or not. You know, just because we decided in September that we thought we should try a certain product doesn't mean we're going to just use that all year, and then next September we're going to look at a bunch of data and say, oh, well, gee, he didn't really make much progress after October. Now, there's no excuse for that. We need to use it, we need to monitor it on a regular basis so that we can continually improve that student's program. I would expect no less. You know, monitoring progress varies with the type of product, and I want to think about not only, you know, do we videotape, do we collect work that the student has produced, do we observe, do we do interval data, do we do periodic data, what do we do? Do we do it every time he uses it? But the other thing is, what are we going to do with it? For instance, if the child can participate in decision making about their use of AT, then sharing that data with that student is critical. He or she should be part of the IEP team if they're willing and able to participate. But on a weekly or monthly basis, it can help a student to know how they're doing, to have that sense of, am I making progress? Am I doing better? Sometimes a student will think they prefer one way of doing something. Perhaps they would prefer to write with a pencil because other kids write with a pencil. But if they look at a comparison of perhaps the length of sentences that get counted as correct because they're legible, they might decide that for some longer assignments they would want to use a keyboard or a computer. So I think not only how do we measure the data, but what do we do with it is a critical thing to think about for that IEP team. I can think of another student who used a voice output device, and he had been taught to use a fairly standard voice output device where you touch a series of keys, And it worked for him, and then he happened to be a very, very smart student, and the science teacher taught him to do Morse code. And so he was very excited about Morse code. He went home and he studied it at night and on the weekends, and he wanted to have voice output with Morse code, which was set up for him, and he loved that. But unfortunately, even after several months, it wasn't nearly as fast as it was to use the other device. The whole team, including that student, looked at that data and made the decision that for his recreational writing, his writing to friends, his use of the computer to email friends and do things like that, he would go ahead and use Morse code because he enjoyed it so. But for verbal communication at school, because it was faster and more efficient to use the other device, he would use that. But you can't reach that decision unless you have the data to look at. So I think that's a critical piece, is making sure that everyone needs to see the data, that everyone needs to see it is seeing it.